Are you there, man?
I am, Carl. Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon. It's good to have you. Almost everybody in the world knows who you are, but for those that don't, because new people are joining us all the time, Mike Zullo was the lead investigator of the Obama fraud case under Sheriff Joe Arpaio for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Joe Arpaio went out of office in January of 2017. There was a press conference held, the last press conference of 3. It was a 1-hour press conference. I was there in Phoenix, Arizona. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Mike Zullo, they did the press conference. I was there as a guest, and just because I had been kind of the voice of that investigation for a while. And it was at the sheriff's office for an hour. You can still see that press conference about the Obama fraud case. That was the last official one before Joe Arpaio went out of office. If he had gone back in office, that would have been his 7th term, right, Mike Zullo?
Yes.
Yeah, but he'd served 6 terms as sheriff, and prior to that, some 30 years in federal law enforcement with DEA. He was also district supervisor with the DEA, western part of the United States. He was stationed in Mexico at times. He was stationed in the Middle East at times. That's the kind of lawman they had at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and Mike Zullo worked under him and with him on this Obama fraud case. All right, now that everybody knows who Mike Zullo is, and of course most of our listeners know you well, Mike, let's talk first about... And I understand you have permission from former Sheriff Joe Arpaio to discuss this. Let's talk about what was reported just a few days ago in mainstream media, that Sheriff Joe files a defamation lawsuit against various media companies and big figureheads, including CNN President Jeff Zucker. And this lawsuit is for some $300 million plus attorney fees. Tell us what all of that is about, and really anything else you want to talk about. Just go ahead, Mike.
Well, Carl, back in 2018, Sheriff Arpaio was running for U.S. Senate, and we are in 2018.
Yeah.
But before that, he was running for U.S. Senate. Obviously, he was not elected in the Republican primary. But when that was going on, and I could recall these things personally because I witnessed them live or read them online within minutes of them coming out, there were a number of times where big outlets, media outlets, had made not only accusations, but basically dogmatic statements that Sheriff Arpaio was a convicted felon and had done prison time.
Mm-hmm.
Which were completely defamatory. They're completely untrue.
Yeah. Well, that's fake. That's fake news, brother. That's fake news. That's how they roll. That's how they roll.
Well, it's also news with an intent, because here we have the sheriff going through an electoral process, and they have to do anything they can to make sure he never got elected to the U.S. Senate.
Yeah. They
feared him. So what Arpaio has done is he has filed an over $300 million lawsuit against 3 major news outlets. And the lawsuit plaintiffs, which is Arpaio himself, against Jeff Zucker, the head of CNN, Chris Como, the news anchor from CNN corporately. He's also filed against the Huffington Post, with a reporter by the name of Kevin Robillard, I believe his name is. There is also Rolling Stone magazine, Tessa Stewart, another reporter. So he's filed these actions against not only the reporters or the TV anchors, but against the head of CNN, which is number 1 for fake news, and the entities themselves. And in his filing, what he is pointing to is the fact that especially Como on a nationally syndicated broadcast, who Como, to my understanding, is an attorney who should know the difference between a convicted felon and someone who was convicted of a misdemeanor,
you would think,
which was going back in time when that was all going on, where the judge had made a determination that Arpaio did not follow another judge's orders. And that is a big bone of contention, because that isn't really 100% patently clear, and there was an appeal process that was set to happen. But Donald Trump intervened, and he pardoned Joe Arpaio of any of these allegations. What he did, in fact, was make a national statement and came out and said that he is pardoning Arpaio for this trivial offense. Going back to that time, when we were going through Joe Arpaio's re-election bid for sheriff, I believe I was on your show numerous times, and, it was a deep state attack against the sheriff, and they did something unprecedented. They decided to charge Sheriff Arpaio with this misdemeanor violation a week or so right before early voting started in the state of Arizona for sheriff. Mm-hmm. Unprecedented. They don't do things like that. There's a directive from the Department of Justice not to do things like that. So they interfered with his re-election campaign. He was calculated to win that campaign. His challenger at that point in time had about $300,000 of campaign money to his name. And right after that announcement was made that they were charging him, $3 million flowed into that guy's coffers.
Yeah.
And Arpaio was ultimately defeated.
Yeah.
Well, now when he was running for the Senate, here they come out and they start referring to him as a convicted felon.
Yeah.
And that was CNN. Huffington Post, I believe, also referred to him as being a convicted felon. And I think it was Rolling Stone that actually said he had done prison time. Mm-hmm. So these things are out there, and they're out there in perpetuity. But the damage that was done to Arpaio was not only on his private person, but he is a national and international recognized name.
Yeah.
And CNN is what's piped overseas, and it's piped into every airport in the nation by contract. So if you are just the guy sitting in an airport in Texas and you don't know who Sheriff Arpaio is, you're going to hear about this sheriff who is an ex-felon because of, quote, a pardon by the president. Mm-hmm. Well, he never was an ex-felon.
Right.
He never was a felon. He was never convicted of a felony. And even on his misdemeanor charge, which, as I alluded to, was going to be appealed, it was like a barking dog ticket.
Yeah.
This is nothing. It's nothing.
I know.
It was just revenge for his stance that he takes being the fighter that he is.
Yeah, and you were deeply involved in that trial, and you were on our show before the trial and after the trial talking about it, and we've unpacked that many times. So you know what you're talking about here. He was not convicted of a felony.
No, he absolutely was not. And there was also contention when this whole misdemeanor trial was going on. I don't believe, and neither do his attorneys and a number of attorneys, he was charged under an inappropriate statute.
Yeah.
And that was all manipulated by the DOJ.
Yeah.
Because had they charged him on the correct statute, they would not have been able to charge him because a 1-year statute of limitations had lapsed.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But what they did is they jicky-jacked with the statutes, and they charged him under an erroneous statute so they could get around the statute of limitations problem.
Right. Right. Okay, let's do this, Mike. Let's take our first break. And when we come back, we'll continue with this story because there's still more information you need to unpack. And then, after the bottom of the hour, we'll jump right in to the Mueller investigation and what some of the talking heads in the mainstream media are saying now that can go straight to the Obama fraud case. It's absolutely unbelievable, people. If you haven't heard this, you don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. More with the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, my world-famous producer Mallory Bardwell, and Mike Zullo's in the house. Give us 2 minutes. We'll be right back. All right, folks, welcome back. So glad you're in the house with us. Mike Zullo is my guest this afternoon. So, Mike Zullo, let's continue with this conversation. So, the article to which you are referring, well, actually, it's picked up all in the mainstream media, but you and I first started looking at the article at ABC15.com. So the ABC network published this article, and so Sheriff Arpaio is suing CNN, not only the president, Jeff Zucker, but a broadcaster, Chris Cuomo, and I think Robillard, no, that's Kevin at Huffington Post and the Rolling Stone, $300,500,000 plus attorney fees. And then, Mike, of course, you know this as well, and I'll get you to speak to this and some of the ramifications, fake news and all that. But just a few months prior to this lawsuit, this was also reported at ABC15.com and in mainstream media that Joe Arpaio has also sued the New York Times for an amount of $147,500,000 in damages. And here's the deal, Mike. The headlines, it was an article in the New York Times by a Michelle Cottle, C-O-T-T-L-E, and it was an August 2018 op-ed. And, Mike, here's the title. Folks, Freedom Friday listeners, here's the title to the article. Now, just think, if you were the sheriff, wouldn't you sue them for defamation? Listen to the title. It's a long title, but listen to it. Well, comma, at least Sheriff Joe isn't going to Congress, dash. Arpaio's loss in Arizona's Senate Republican primary is a fitting end to the public life of a truly sadistic man. End quote. That was the title of the article, Mike. I hope between these two lawsuits that Sheriff Joe does wind up being a half-billionaire. I pray for him that this happens.
Carl, I have to really be brutally candid here. I know Sheriff Arpaio for 13 years. For the last 8, before he left as sheriff, I worked almost side by side with him during that investigation in the birth certificate and some other things that we were doing in the sheriff's office. At one point in time, for a year, I had an office, which at that time was called the 19th floor in the Wells Fargo building. That's where his office is. I would be with him every day. I have never heard a racist comment come out of his mouth.
Yep.
Never. And I've been in private meetings. I've been in a host of different environments.
Yeah.
One-on-one conversations. The man is anything but that.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, and he never talks about this, and it bothers me that he doesn't. He has mixed races in his own immediate family.
Yes. Children and grandchildren, or grandchildren. Yes.
Yes.
I know.
He is not a racist. He is not this heartless guy that they make him out to be.
I know.
And this is a coordinated effort
yes.
in the left-wing media to destroy him. You know, if they can label you, they destroy you.
Yep.
And that's what they have tried to do to him. Well, he's fighting back.
Good.
Joe Arpaio style, he's fighting back, and he's going for big dollars. My understanding on the most recent lawsuit against the 3 agencies is the judge. You always run a risk with these judges, especially this was filed in D.C., that a judge is just partisan and he just kicks it to the curb and dismisses your lawsuit. That didn't happen here. The judge has ordered a show cause hearing.
Yep.
Which means both sides have to come to the table now and present their side to a judge.
It was not kicked to the curb.
This is in print, and this is archived video and audio. And that isn't just, it's not just Como on CNN. It was guests on a multitude of different other stations calling him a convicted felon.
And
so he's got a good leg to stand on going into this.
Yeah, technically, I suppose he could turn around and sue all of those guests, especially if he wins these suits.
Well, it's going to, in my opinion, it's going to be very difficult for a judge to say there's nothing here because it's preserved.
Yeah, it's all recorded. It's in print. It's in video. Millions of people saw it and heard it. Yeah. And you know what you said.
Carl, it would be no different than if somebody in the media, you know how they came against us.
Yeah.
Someone in the media said that I was a pedophile.
Yeah.
It's no different. That's such a blatant lie. I'm going to sue you.
Yeah. No, I know.
And you can't just go out and say things like this. The media thinks they're above it all.
Yeah.
They think they are a special class of citizen that has this open right under freedom of speech to say and do just about anything. Right. And that stuff has to stop.
Right. You're absolutely right. Listen, Mike, and I just want to add to what you say. I don't carry near the weight you do with all of that, but because of your relationship with the sheriff and my relationship with you, then I was invited out to the sheriff's office twice, and as you know, I also spent hours and hours and hours in his office with him, with you. There were times when you weren't even in there, and it was just the sheriff and I for hours. I watched him swear in a bunch of Border Patrol agents. You remember that day?
Yes.
Yeah, I was there when he did that. Sheriff Joe and I had personal conversations. I prayed over the man at one time. I mean, he had some things going on there that he just needed prayer for, and he was gracious. He was gracious. His employees, they loved him. He loved them. He was gracious to them. He told me about his mixed race, relations, and I'm with you. In all those hours we sat getting ready for that big conference, I never, ever heard any inkling of any kind of racism the man, I'm not making him out to be an angel. None of us are. But he was a prince of a gentleman, a good man, cared about Maricopa County and the residents, loved the sheriff's office, and really cared about the protection of Maricopa County, particularly from the flood of illegals and the crime that was coming from it. And, so there you go. So I say to him, go, Joe, go. Win this lawsuit.
Well, Carl, and you were there, and you'll remember this, for one of those late-night meetings. The 19th floor.
Oh, yeah.
In his office. And we were all around that table.
Yes.
And now this is an after-hours meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting ready to do what we were going to do with the last press release.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember, that was guys sitting around a table.
Mm-hmm.
The formalities were gone.
Yep.
You didn't hear one derogatory word out of his mouth about anybody.
That's right. And he could have. That was his house. That was his house.
Well, and you being a former law enforcement officer, you know how that runs. You go into those circles, everybody's behind closed doors.
Yep.
The man is the same no matter where you put him.
Yep. I was very impressed. I told you that when we left that night. Yeah. I know. It was unbelievable. And that meeting alone was like 4 hours. I won't forget that, man. The seat of my pants were just, I think I had holes in them. That was a long day.
It felt like an eternity, I remember.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, well, listen, we're going to have to go out right now. But, Mike, when we come back, I really can't wait to talk about this next segment because, man, these idiot talking heads are now making some accusations. They're going to hate that they ever uttered these words. Don't you agree, Mike?
Yes, they are. I can't wait.
I can't wait either. Folks, I know you can't wait. We're at the bottom of the first hour. Mike Zullo is going to hang around, and we're going to break some stuff to you. Break if you've never heard it, but even if you've heard this news, you might not have made the connection we're going to make and some insight we're going to give you. So you don't want to miss it back, and I'm so glad that you're back with us in the Oval Office, Gulf Coast Talk Radio. Mike Zullo is my guest this afternoon, so we're going to bring Mike back on. And so, Mike, we're at the bottom of the first hour. We've been talking about Joe Arpaio's lawsuits, one against the New York Times back in October, and then just a few days ago against CNN, the Huffington Post, the Rolling Stone. The collective lawsuit total is $500 million between all those lawsuits, plus attorney's fees. And you told us, just wrap this up and then we'll move to the next topic. You told us that the judge has now called for the showing of evidence. What's that official term? I forgot.
Show cause hearing.
Yeah, show cause hearing. And so the judge hasn't just thrown it to the curb. He's basically saying, okay, this looks like there may be something here. Let's have a show cause hearing. Let's see what we've got. I'm not going to just throw it out. This doesn't seem frivolous. It's basically recorded on video. It was on television. It was broadcast to the world. It's in print. I think the sheriff might have a case here. Am I kind of right as to where this is headed so far?
Yeah, it's a determination, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. I have a good feeling. I think he survives it.
Yeah, me too. And even if they do some kind of deal, because rarely do these huge cases like this wind up in court. Usually there's some kind of settlement. I pray he takes it all the way to court or either settles for a huge amount. I mean, the man deserves it.
Yeah, that's a whole nother bridge he's going to have to cross. But I can't see them trying to prevail in a courtroom because the evidence is there.
Yeah, they just can't. They can't, and it is defamatory. I mean, they accused him of being a convicted felon, and he's not. They accused him of having come out of jail, and he never was in jail. They accused him of being a truly sadistic man, and there's no evidence of that at all. And that was a headline in the New York Times. I mean, you can't just do that. You can't come into the headlines and say he's a sadist, he's a child molester, he's a rapist. You can't do that to people, even public figures, unless there's something to it.
No, and the fact of the matter is, if this was a Democratic candidate, they wouldn't have done it at all.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. No doubt. But anyway, all right, so we wrap that up. People can get the podcast tomorrow. So let's move on. MoveOn.org. So here's the good one. Here's the good one. All right. So breathlessly, mainstream media reported, quote, here's one headline: legal expert compares Trump's election to immigrants who gain their citizenship by fraud. Brother, when I saw that headline, I stuck my finger in the air and I snapped my neck and I said, oh, no, she didn't. No, she didn't say that. So listen.
She said it.
Oh, my gosh. So they breathlessly quote this woman who they claim is this legal expert, a former U.S. attorney, Barbara McQuade, on MSNBC, was asked her thoughts about the latest round of federal filings released by special counsel Robert Mueller and investigators in the Southern District of New York, otherwise known as SDNY. And it all has to do with the attorney Michael Cohen and the allegations of fraud and on Cohen's part and perhaps on Trump's part. And, of course, I'm going to let you speak to that because I don't think any fraud has been committed. I don't think any crimes have been committed in what we've heard thus far. But the bottom line is, so they questioned this McQuade, who they're breathlessly advertising all over mainstream as a legal expert, and listen to the end of this particular article. And all the articles have this statement in it, and I'm looking at one in particular. It says, McQuade then ended her segment with an immigration-themed thought experiment. Oh, how sweet. A thought experiment. Quote, no, she ended her segment with an outlandish, completely regrettable statement, a statement they will regret for a long time. Here's what she said, quote, when immigrants procure their citizenship by fraud, we strip them of their citizenship, she noted. Quote, when a president procures his presidency by fraud, should we consider doing the same, end quote. And then in some other place I read where she kind of corrected that and said, well, I meant strip him of his presidency. And then other talking heads, I've got another one here. Let me see. I'm just going to read this and then you can comment. Yeah, Daniel S. Goldman, a former assistant U.S. attorney and an NBC legal analyst. Here's what he said. But although Trump won't be charged as Cohen's co-conspirator as long as he's in office, there is nonetheless sufficient evidence to bring to charge him with defrauding the American people in order to obtain the highest office in the land. And then he went on to say that when he comes out of office, they can charge him with that felony and strip him of titles. Now, brother, I'm going to hush because I think a lot of our listeners are already putting 2 plus 2 together, but now it's your turn, Mike. Unload on this.
Well, Carl, before we go into the correlation with the birth certificate, I think her statement not only served its purpose as a little bit of a dog whistle to a liberal base, that this is how important this is, that this come to fruition, but I think it goes deeper than that. Here's what they understand. If you can prove, which they'll never be able to do because it just didn't happen, but if you can prove that President Trump orchestrated a chain of events that defrauded the American people before they went to vote for the presidency of the United States, you thereby make him illegitimate. Mm-hmm. And to make him an illegitimate president means his Supreme Court picks are illegitimate. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're gunning for. They want to nullify those Supreme Court picks more than Trump himself at this point.
I think so, yeah.
They have a problem now with the Supreme Court.
Yep.
You are getting judges that look to the intent of the framers as to what they meant when they initiated things in the Bill of Rights and so forth. So that's what I think that is truly about.
Yeah.
Is if they could nullify his election, they could nullify him, and then just about every act he took would be nullified.
Yeah,
including the Supreme Court nominations.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Well, take just what I said, and now maybe your audience is going to get even a bigger revelation as to why the Obama birth certificate investigation was news media blackout, why it was so vehemently opposed by the left. Until today, they are still trying to persuade the American people that that document is real, and anyone who says the contrary is an outright lunatic.
Right.
Because Obama proffered that birth certificate to the American people in 2011, about 6 or 7 months before an election for president for his second term was to take place. And
at the prodding of a man named Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. And the other problem that he's got with that is if it was determined in 2011 that there was a problem with his, quote, birth narrative and or citizenship, he would have had a problem retroactively back to 2008 because they also produced a short form birth certificate in 2008 trying to quell the argument that he was born where he said he was born or where the narrative maintained he was born. So this has huge ramifications. And like you and I have said, that birth certificate is the foundational lie to the presidency of the United States.
Yes. He obtained the office by fraud.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That document is not a document. It is not a birth certificate, and it is peppered with legal problems. If you try to authenticate that PDF file, you could not. That birth certificate needed to be adjudicated in a court of law. That's why they never came to a courtroom on all those court challenges with an official certified copy, because they couldn't.
And it's also why none of the mainstream media has ever reported on the details, really, of any of your press conferences, but especially the third and the last one, December 2016. They have never done a detailed investigative report on that press conference because what you presented was so overwhelming and signed off on by two international document examination companies, a double blind. They were each given all the information you had. Neither one knew that the other one was looking at it. They both came to the same conclusion. And both of them found different things that were wrong with it. And both of them basically, I'm just paraphrasing, but they both basically said this is a fraudulent document. It was built from the ground up on a blank piece of paper.
Yes, it actually wasn't even a piece of paper. It was done inside the mind of a computer.
Yep.
So when people like to tell us that, well, you don't have the original document, I beg to differ. That PDF is the original fabrication.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're in possession of a document, an original official copy with a seal, etc., that was used apparently as one of the documents to build Obama's fraudulent documents from all the forensic investigation. That was one of them, and actually both of the companies said that document was used. There are probably other documents, but we know that one was, and you're in possession of it. The bottom line is you've got the goods on this to prove that whole document was fraudulent, and unless he can produce a paper copy with a seal and an affidavit that this is it, and the microfilm that would back it all up, then he doesn't have a birth certificate, not a legal one. But what he did was present a fraudulent form of identification to be the commander-in-chief of America's armed forces, to send men and women into harm's way, some of them to their death, and to serve in the office of the executive branch of the United States government in a fraudulent manner. And now, Mike, I'll let you get the pleasure of saying this, but what these talking heads are trying to put on Trump, what does that mean? How does that extrapolate over to Obama?
Well, you've got these hush payments that obviously were now made, and those payments had to do with sexual relations that happened a decade or so prior to Mr. Trump being president or even running for the office of president, when he was a private individual. And the narrative that's being painted here is during the campaign, these stories were going to surface, and Trump wanted to kill the stories, and arrangements were made to effectively buy the silence of these women. Well, that's a convenient narrative. But there's another side to this, especially with the Stormy Daniels saga. Carl, you would remember this. There are statutes called extortion.
Yeah.
If someone were to come to you because you are running for public office and they are telling you, unless you pay me, I'm going to do you harm,
Yeah.
that's extortion.
Yeah.
She should have been investigated and charged for extortion. And then you take it one step further. Now we know there was a non-disclosure agreement. And if you remember, when Trump was on Air Force One, and a reporter asked him if he knew anything about it, and he said no, he had to say no. There was a non-disclosure agreement. He can't talk about it.
Right.
He's honoring the agreement. Does it come across as a falsehood? Yeah, but he's honoring the agreement.
Right.
That was a non-disclosure.
Right.
So any way he twists and turns with this, they're going to take it and they're going to make it what it is. Well, lo and behold, what the public doesn't understand or realize any longer is if you go back, when Obama was running for office, do you remember Reverend Wright?
Oh, yeah.
Reverend Wright was
chickens.
becoming a thorn in the side to Barack Obama. And by Reverend Wright's own admission, the DNC, his campaign, and Obama himself had a one-on-one meeting with Wright, and they offered him $150,000 to stay quiet because it was affecting his campaign. That's a hush payment. Now, it's not clear whether the payment was ever made, but the inducement was made for the reason that they're now saying Trump is illegitimate because he wanted to quell some stories. The other side to the Trump saga, Obama's silencing of Reverend Wright was purely political. Trump's side, and if you recall the taped conversations that Michael Cohen surreptitiously obtained, you can hear Donald Trump concerned about his marriage to Melania.
Yeah. Yeah.
He makes a statement about it.
Well, Mike, let's stop right there. Take a pause. We've got a brief timeout, 2 minutes, and then you pick it up right there about him making the statement to Melania. And then when we come back, we'll tie up the direct connection of all of this that they're saying. And welcome back, Mike Zullo. So, Mike, let's just jump right back into this. So let me just ask you, now that we're back, so you've got this so-called legal expert that the mainstream media is parading around. Her name's Barbara McQuaid. She's a former U.S. attorney, and she has ended the interview that she was on MSNBC by saying, you know, when immigrants procure their citizenship by fraud, we strip them of their citizenship. When a president procures his presidency by fraud, should we consider doing the same? Now, a lot of people took that to mean, should we take away Trump's citizenship? But then later people were opining and saying, well, she meant, should we take away the presidency? Should we take away his title? It's the same thing because he committed fraud. Cohen has proven it. And then this a former assistant U.S. attorney, Daniel Goldman, said something similar on NBC. He said, but although Trump won't be charged as Cohen's co-conspirator, there is nonetheless sufficient evidence to charge him with defrauding the American people in order to obtain the highest office in the land. And then I read somewhere, I wish I could quote it, so folks, I will admit I could be wrong, but in the best of my memory, I read another opinion piece on mainstream where somebody said that they thought for sure that he could be charged criminally once he's out of office, and it could even wind him up in jail or prison. I mean, they were just, really hoping against hope. But so they're out for blood on this. Why? Because they're saying Trump secured the office of presidency by fraud. Now, Mike, so does this mean when the Obama fraud case comes before the Congress or FBI or DOJ under Donald Trump, maybe in his second term, maybe before the second term, and it's found out, everything that you know is found out to the world, does that mean Obama could be stripped of his title and maybe go to jail?
My understanding, speaking with a few former attorney generals, is that, yes, he could be retroactively stripped of the presidency. The felony part of it, that's going to be iffy because there's a statute of limitations. And the problem with the statute is the statute says it's when the crime was discovered or should have been discovered. Mm-hmm. Well, we have a DOJ who refused to look at this. We have an FBI who refused to take any information, even file a report from any citizen about this. So that part is questionable. Mm-hmm. As far as the jail time. I'm not an attorney, so I don't really know the answer to that.
Right.
But I think, Carl, this is the reason. I've always thought this. As a matter of fact, this is in a memo that I wrote to the sheriff right before we did our last press conference, pointing out to him the Title 18 U.S. Code violations, and that was one of them that possibly could have taken place. So I think it's detrimental to the presidency of Barack Obama. It's detrimental to the DNC. And you understand now, this could not just be a one-off, somebody running a copy and screwed something up. This is a coordinated effort. This is a conspiracy. There are going to be multiple players involved in this.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
This should ever come to light.
Yeah, no doubt. And, Mike, you and I are convinced, and I know the sheriff was, and I'm going to say that he probably still is because I've heard him say it and we talked about it, that's what really the bottom line to all of those bogus charges and trying to get him in jail and put him in prison. They wanted felony charges on him. They wanted him in prison. They wound up with a misdemeanor charge and he didn't go to prison, and then Trump pardoned him because Trump won the office. They thought Hillary was going to win, but they wanted to defame him, to disgrace him, to put him in prison. And then Hillary goes in office, and then the whole Obama fraud goes away, and all of the people that are involved in it would be protected. But lo and behold, the man that made it all happen is now the presidency. And so what happens? Mueller investigation. Get him out, get him out, get him out, get him out. And now Cohen is all a part of it. And Cohen needed Trump to be president. Tell our folks why.
Well, Cohen was making money off of his affiliation with Trump. Cohen was pitching influence. And one report I read, he made about $4 million from foreign entities trying to peddle his influence, saying that once Trump became president, he would assist them in securing whatever contracts or whatever other things that they were looking for.
Right.
Michael Cohen needed Donald Trump to become the president of the United States more than anyone else on the face of the planet. Mm-hmm. He was making a living to millions of dollars because of his connection to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Now you've got Michael Cohen out there confessing that what he did, I knew it was wrong, but I did it because I was loyal to Trump. Well, the fact of the matter is, Michael Cohen was lying to everybody. The IRS, he had multitude banking relations that he was lying about. I mean, he's a perpetual liar.
Yeah. Mike, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to stop right there. The clock has eaten us up again. Thank you for this awesome hour today. You've brought a lot of light. You've shed a lot of light. We're going to have you back on soon. This stuff is all still unfolding. You stay up with Sheriff Joe. You give him our regards.
For thousands of years, mankind has debated how creation began. Ancient texts tell us the story, but today the real message behind the pivotal account of the Garden of Eden has been obfuscated and lost. That is, until now. World-renowned author Carl Gallups digs up the hidden truths from the book of Genesis to finally give back the knowledge that was lost to the world. Find out what really happened in the Garden of Eden, what Jesus taught about Eden on the cross, and how the conflict between Jesus and the gods of antiquity is about to erupt on planet Earth, fulfilling biblical prophecy. In the new book, Gods of Ground Zero, this explains everything.